first, what you said about no woman wants an insecure man. The problem is that an insecure man attracts an insecure woman. And whether that woman wants to accept that or not is the truth. Because we can sit here all day and talk about what happened years ago, with you and listening to single friends or whatever. At the end of the day, I had my own insecurities as well. Now, how many women are willing to admit that? I really don't. I really don't know. But when it comes down to it, like does attract like. So when we say like attracts like, a lot of people don't really understand what that means. What it really means is like your unconscious trauma, my unconscious trauma sees your unconscious trauma, and we can fix each other. So that's really what the like really means. When we say like attracts like, of course, there are some times where opposites attract, but they also say opposites attract and then they attack. So it doesn't work out that well, because at first they attract each other like, oh, I can be more like you, right? But then eventually they'll start to, clash and butt heads, and then the relationship can go straight to hell.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Couples Development Podcast. My name is Coach Clark.
And I am Coach Mel, and we are a husband and wife team of relationship coaches. So what do you want to talk about today, husband?
I want to bring it back a little bit. Recently, I was watching one of our old videos where you were doing a segment called Irreplaceable Man 101. Irreplaceable Man 101. And in it, you were speaking about how allowing people who you should vet and decide whether or not they're qualified enough to offer relationship advice, if you should actually be taking relationship advice from them. And during that time, I remember I was letting a lot of friends in my ear in terms of how we were in a relationship, right? And literally all of them single friends. And me listening to their information and their input and their unsolicited advice caused a lot of damage in our relationship. So I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so do you want to take a look at the clip that you're talking about?
Let's watch it, yeah.
So there was a time period in my relationship with my husband where this was his daily schedule. Monday through Friday, this was the basic daily schedule. He would wake up in the morning and play 2K. Then he would go to work. He would come home at about 3 p.m. I would make him lunch. Then he'd watch ESPN or play 2K until dinner. Then I'd make dinner. Then he'd watch the game if there was a game on that day. Then we watch a movie or TV. Then we get intimate at the end of the night, and then we go to sleep. And then this would basically be his schedule Monday through Friday, rinse and repeat. Around the same time, for whatever reason, he started letting other men get into his ear, and single men, mind you. And in all of the years that we'd been together, we'd never had an argument about him feeling like he was being emasculated in our relationship or feeling like he needed to put his foot down in our relationship. But as soon as these single men got into his ears, they started to influence him in a very negative way, and it started having harmful effects on our relationship. So we go and see a couples therapist, and the couples therapist asked my husband, so what is it that you're looking to get out of couples therapy? And my husband says, I just want things to go back to the way that they were. And I'm like, so you want things to go back to the way that they were? You mean the same time period where you were complaining about feeling emasculated in our relationship, the same time period you were saying that you needed to put your foot down in our relationship? And my husband was like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. So this is a personal example to explain to you all why going to the wrong people for advice about your relationship can actually cause really harmful damage, sometimes to the point of no return.
Okay, so I've grown a lot since that time. I don't believe that I allow others to dictate or influence how we are in our relationship. if anything, if I'm feeling something, I feel much more comfortable just telling you how I feel versus internalizing and looking up ways to better deal with certain situations. And doing so, and I don't know if men are, well, I don't think men are really taught how to talk about their feelings. And so they do a lot of assuming and they do a lot of listening to others and they go, oh, this should work. And so during that time, I was very confused in, what a husband or man is supposed to be and how they're supposed to act. I didn't have I didn't grow up with my father. I never seen my mother in a relationship, and I'm 42 years old. I have never seen my mother in a relationship or a healthy relationship dynamic growing up. And so oftentimes when you have several men telling you certain things, if you see things on the internet and so on and so forth, I'm not sure if women do deal with this too, but it can sort of have you thinking, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? You can kind of like set doubt. It's kind of like in church, when they say how the devil is a liar. He will have you thinking certain things and reacting to things in ways that aren't naturally you. And you have to kind of like remember to stay centered and remember who you are and what got you here in the first place. And so, and surprisingly enough, I started doing a bunch of stupidity. After a decade since we've been together. So it's kind of like what got me here. I didn't realize that I was doing the right thing by you or doing right by you. I definitely I wasn't perfect by any means, but it's when I'm allowing these other voices to enter my head and influence how I act towards you, how I react towards you. That really caused a lot of damage. I don't know if you remember that time period.
Yeah, I couldn't ever forget it. I remember during that time period, there was once when I told you, I was like, why are you doing this to us? Mm-hmm. Because it seemed to come so out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, we'd already been together 10 years by that point. Mm-hmm. So to then have voices of other people, especially single men, influencing our relationship dynamic felt like it came out of left field for me.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I also remember there was once, and this is the thing too, right? During that time period, you once came to me and you were like just in a bad mood. And you're like, you were telling me, I'm going to take my balls back. Do you remember that? And I remember saying like, what the hell are you talking about? Like like, what are you talking about? You get home, you go to work, you get home from work, your wife cooks your food, she takes care of you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you even referencing? So it's almost like hearing what other people say, other people who are not in our relationship had so much power over our relationship, even though they're not in our house, seeing how, we relate with each other. You know what I mean? And this is also something that I noticed, which was, a lot of times when men talk, we talk a lot about missing fathers and Black men not growing up with fathers. And what's interesting to me about that is it's almost like men don't recognize that their fathers felt exactly how they feel currently. Meaning, let me explain to you what I mean by that. Men will say that it's the woman in their life that's making them leave their children, right? Without recognizing their father said the same thing about why they left them. So there has to be a man who's willing to break that cycle of running away from responsibility, running away from relationship, running away from their children when things get tough. Because like you were saying, not having a father, and seeing your mom in a relationship and what that dynamic looked like, gave space for single men to come in and be like, oh, this is what's happening. Even though they're not in our relationship, but yet they can come in and say, this is what's happening. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. Which isn't likely to happen when a man grows up with a healthy father. I don't want to just say a father because there's good ones and there's bad ones, but with a healthy father, with a healthy mindset who has good relationship skills, had you had that, you would have had someone to go to that experienced marriage versus talking to a bunch of single men,
As we're talking, I'm processing a lot right now. And it's reminding me of, I don't know if a lot of other men can relate to this. But I mean, Black men, we hate that people see us all as the same. Mm-hmm. I know I do. So I don't know how many, well, at the same time, I don't know how many can relate to this, but I think it's underrated the damage that not having a father at home, a good father at home. Because oftentimes you hear men saying, oh, look at this kid, he's acting bad. You can tell he didn't have a father at home. And, you can tell he wasn't disciplined, and you can tell da. I know several dudes who had 2-parent households. They were spanked, they were disciplined, blah, 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 who are in jail right now. But, Black people, it's like you have to spank them, you have to discipline, and they need your dad. So, no offense to those who do, but who are we taught by, right? But anyway, going back to what I was saying, I think it's highly underrated how important it is to have a healthy male figure or role model in a young man's life. I don't want to speak about the women's experience, even though I know a lot of guys, on these podcasts are like, oh, well, she's promiscuous because her father wasn't there, right? So I think it's underrated at how important it is for healthy male figures to be around growing Black men. And it's almost like trying to figure out what mask am I supposed to put on for me to feel comfortable in my own skin, whereas feel comfortable in your own skin. And so it always felt like there was a little bit of doubt, even though I thought I knew who I was. I know what I enjoy. It's like there's always this it's validation that you're looking for that, okay, cool, that you're good. And I noticed that with a lot of Black men, they hate to be considered a monolith. They hate to be seen like, oh, you guys all white people think we're all the same. But at the end of the day, Black men, I call it the barbershop culture, right? There is a uniform. We have to dress a certain way. We have to walk a certain way. We have to speak a certain way. We have to like certain women. They have to have certain bodies. We have to all like the same. Like there's a uniform that we're supposed to all have as Black men. And I wonder if all these Black men who follow these things, right, whoever made up these rules, right, if they all had strong male role models in their lives, would there be such a thing where all of us kind of like fit this box per se?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think that when we're talking about strength, I think that men who didn't have healthy fathers in their lives don't really understand what strength is. They think strength is something toxic. So we have to consider that as well. Yeah.
They think strength is something toxic, or
their idea of what looks strong. Yeah.
Of what looks strong can be toxic. Okay.
Yeah, it is toxic. Okay. Because there's so many examples of it. So
because being able to, I'm sorry to push back here. So being able to lift certain weights, you think that's toxic?
But we're not talking about physical strength, right? When you said strength, you were talking about internal, right?
Got it. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. So their idea of strength is toxic because at its core, what they call strength is hide who you really are. That's really what it is. Like you can't wear this. You can't talk this way. You can't walk this way. You can't eat this way. You can't behave this way. So in essence, it's just saying hide who you really are to the world. You can't. Anger. Yeah. It's teaching young men how to hide their authenticity. So to me, that is very toxic. So what a healthy father does is, a lot of people don't understand what healthy parenting is. Healthy parenting is not telling your child who to become. That is not what healthy parenting is. Being a healthy father means seeing who your son is and helping him and guiding him into developing more into that, as long as he's not harming himself or another person. That's what a healthy father does. A healthy father doesn't shame their child out of who they were designed to be. That's not what healthy parenting is. And I think that we have to have that conversation because a lot of people don't know what that means.
Yeah. And again, for me, the trickling effect of that is and I know women, if you ask women, how many of you guys would love to be with a man who's insecure? No one raised their hands. And so if you're constantly looking for validation that as a man, you're good enough, that's literally insecurity defined right there. Like you're not secure in who you are. You're going to say you are, like, I lift weights, work out, You got mad women everywhere, or whatever. But whatever the crap is, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of being comfortable, yeah, in terms of being comfortable with who you are as a person and truly comfortable, that's where a lot of I think a lot of Black men don't really understand what that is. I feel like other races of men, they from my perspective, I'm not saying I'm right about this, but it doesn't seem like there's as many rules. They can just, this guy's this guy, that guy's that guy, and that's it.
Yeah.
But if a Black man speaks a certain way,
mm-hmm.
they might say he talks too white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if he, I don't know, likes to wear bow ties or something, whatever, he might be sideways. If he doesn't like women who are shaped a certain way, he's a weirdo. It's like, it's all, again, we all have to fit this same box. And so anyway, carrying that over to what we were talking about at the beginning, constantly wanting that validation, because men crave male camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like oftentimes, I don't know if I'm going to mention the feeling here, it can be confusing trying to discern between positive camaraderie, male camaraderie, and negative male camaraderie, per se. And I think that can be a major issue. And so when you're one of 10 or 15 dudes in a group or a group chat, and I don't know, out of the people who are active, 8, 9 of them are saying this, that, and the other, and you're often caught in left field, you don't want to feel ostracized and you don't want to be the one getting clowned in the group chat and everything. And so you'll sometimes just laugh along to things that you don't find funny. And the more you do that, the more you find yourself just kind of like, I guess this is what I'm supposed to think. I'm supposed to be like. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be ostracized. You want to be like, the weirdo of the group. You know what I mean? And it can be really hard to deal with that, because when you're unsure of yourself, because a lot of guys are like, oh, this guy's soft and this guy's this and this guy's that. Like, cool. Listen, I get that. I'm happy that you are the hardest person ever. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, but I think that for a long time, you let that idea of whatever a certain type of man would consider soft get to you without paying attention to the results that you were actually getting. Because regardless of what that man was saying, your results show different.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of men will ignore the results they're actually getting and the life they're actually living, and then think that whatever some random dude is saying is what's true about them.
Yeah.
While ignoring the results that they're actually getting.
Yeah.
So when you said, well, you don't know what to think, like I will tell anyone, what is your goal? Is the advice this person giving you helping you to move toward that goal or away from that goal?
Yeah.
So if your goal is to keep your relationship intact, you have to ask yourself, is this advice this dude is giving me helping me to keep my relationship intact, or is it pulling my relationship apart? Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's that expression that says that, like, you are the star in your life, right? And everybody else, your circle, your family members, your friends are just backup singers, right?
Yeah.
And you have to know who to turn the volume up on, who to turn the volume down on, and who to mute altogether.
Yep.
And a lot of us are not very good at doing that because we assume that anyone in our circle knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? And most of the time, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Especially if they've never experienced a marriage. They have no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But yet we'll listen to them as if what they're saying is gospel.
Yeah. And oftentimes, those who aren't really living the life that you're living, whether they're doing it with malicious intent or not, they just may automatically want to pull you back down to where they are.
Of course.
Because I've noticed that the more I grow, the more conflict it seemed to cause with certain people I was accustomed to associating with. But then again, the fear of like being abandoned by friends, you kind of like, play along per se.
That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
I just think at that point, that man has to ask himself, which one do I want to save? Right? Am I caring more about saving the relationship with this guy, or am I caring more about saving the relationship with my girlfriend or my wife?
Yeah.
He has to be honest with himself about that, and decide from there. It's 100% up to him.
Yeah.
You know, so again, like you were saying, that's why healthy fathers are important. And again, the key word there is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely important. And by healthy, we mean someone who fully stands firm in who he is and doesn't get shaken so easily by the opinions of other men.
Yeah.
And to mold and bend himself into and contort himself into somebody completely different that is inauthentic to who he is, because then he's just going to pass that down to his child as well.
Now, the other thing I wonder is if are women aware of this? Because women are like, I don't want no insecure man. I want this. I want, like, they want, you know, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You want someone who is, you know, little, if any, red flags at all.
Yeah.
At least that you're aware of.
Yeah.
But if we all understand, if our God-fearing people all understand that we're all inherently flawed and we all have our issues, then that means that it's impossible for someone not to come with red flags. Yeah,
I think I agree with you 100%. I think we like to live in our minds like there's a way to eventually achieve perfection. There's a way to achieve perfection in a relationship. Eventually, there's a way to achieve perfection in our careers. Eventually, there's a way to achieve perfection in parenting. And it just doesn't work that way. And I think we can struggle to radically accept that. That's just never going to happen. You know, it's about learning it's about healthy conflict resolution, because conflict is always going to come up. It just will. You know, it's learning how to do it in a healthy and constructive manner that we should be putting our focus on, and not thinking that there's some way for us to never be, you know, in conflict. As far as what you said about no woman wants an insecure man, the problem is that an insecure man attracts an insecure woman. And whether that woman wants to accept that or not is the truth. Because we can sit here all day and talk about what happened years ago, you know, with you and listening to single friends or whatever. At the end of the day, I had my own insecurities as well. Now, how many women are willing to admit that? I really don't. I really don't know. But when it comes down to it, like does attract like. So when we say like attracts like, a lot of people don't really understand what that means. What it really means is like your unconscious trauma, my unconscious trauma sees your unconscious trauma, and we can fix each other. So that's really what the like really means. When we say like attracts like, of course, there are some times where opposites attract, but they also say opposites attract and then they attack. So it doesn't work out that well, because at first they attract each other like, oh, I can be more like you, right? But then eventually they'll start to, you know, clash and butt heads, and then the relationship can go straight to hell.
Is that kind of like codependence attracting codependence type of thing?
It can happen that way, but a lot of times in the dynamic, it's more so someone with a personality disorder attracting a codependent, and a codependent being attracted to someone with a personality disorder. So it makes sense. But two codependents could, of course, be in a relationship together too. So I think that we have to accept that. I think humans have to accept that we are not perfect, and we have our things to work on and our things to heal from. Because our dynamic, that's why I always say our relationship is proof that God has a sense of humor, because we are so wildly different, but we're not different in like values and that type of stuff, because then it would just be, it would be really hard. But in terms of our personalities are wildly different. We're very different in that way. But we had to learn a lot through trial and error, you know, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to get into this field. It was like, oh my God, people need to understand these things so that we can do something, so people can maintain happy, you know, satisfying relationships, so that less children are growing up without fathers. Because a lot of the times too, what we don't know is actually happening is a lot of the clashes that we had in our relationship didn't even have anything to do with each other. It was all old crap from childhood that in the moment we don't even recognize that it's old crap from childhood just sneaking in. We're thinking it's our partner causing it. And I can give a really good example of that. So when in the beginning of our relationship, you know, we laugh about it like crazy now because it's just so like weird, but I understand where it came from. So it's like in the beginning, one of our first arguments was when you told me you owe me, right? I don't remember what the topic was or what you were talking about, what you were referring to when you said that I owe you, but just hearing you say you owe me, I was ready to pop off. I was so angry with you. No. I'm like, I was so angry with you because I'm like, don't you ever again a day in your life tell me that I owe you anything, you know, like, if you want to do something for me, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. We'll be cool either way, but don't do something for me expecting anything from me in return.
Right.
And at the time I didn't know this, but what made that a trigger was that growing up, I didn't have a mother or father. So I always felt like a burden to my caretakers.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that feeling. So I became very self-reliant and taking care of myself psychologically, emotionally, and things like that. So having you come and say that I owe you something, it hit a wound that you would not have known at the time, because I certainly didn't know that wound was there at the time. But it was coming from a place of, I didn't like growing up feeling like I owed anyone anything, because as a child, I did not owe anyone to make sure that my survival remained intact.
Yeah.
But as children, we can process it that way, right? So just hearing another person say, you owe me, just brought up a lot of that childhood stuff from within me. And so that reaction was not about you, because technically speaking, you didn't do anything wrong saying you owe me. But it was about old childhood stuff. So that's one of the things that makes relationships really complex. Yeah. So when people say things like, oh, I shouldn't have to learn this, and it's like, you don't understand. Yeah. You don't really understand what happens in relationships. You just don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll give one of my examples. My wound is abandonment. And again, I did not grow up with my father. Like I consciously remember, seeing him maybe twice. And so I was constantly looking I was constantly thinking, oh, maybe if I was a good boy, a better kid, then maybe I'd be wanted per se. And so taking frantic actions to avoid abandonment was my coping mechanism. And so with you, you being the introvert person that you are, and you need your space and you need time to process and everything else, especially when there's a conflict. And I'm completely opposite. It's kind of like the whole maximizer, minimizer thing that was in the same video. I, stereotypically, it's typically the woman that's a maximizer in a relationship and the male that's a minimizer. Well, in our relationship, we're opposite. And anytime we'd get into an argument, you'd shut down and want to leave, which would then trigger my abandonment issues, and which will make me chase you even more.
And the harder you would try to get me to need you or to react, the more I would become resistant. Correct. And the more I would become resistant, the more you would try to get me to need you and get me to react. And that was the cycle.
Which again had absolutely nothing to do with us.
Nothing.
It was just me looking to, I don't know if that's a feeling cared for. Cared, yeah. Me looking to feel cared for. I often felt ignored, lonely, and cast aside. And that's how it always would make me feel. So, it's a lot of learning and growing we had to do. But, with that said, from that day, that's probably when during that time, and about 3.5, 4 years later, that probably was our roughest stretch.
Yeah, it was really rough because neither one of us really understood. We were like, what the hell is happening? Like it's
we
like
almost weren't together anymore.
It's like what neither one of us understood what was happening, because for you to be with someone for 10 years and not that we didn't argue, of course we did, but we were never that couple that would give each other silent treatments for 2 days, 3 days. But like it just never happened. Like it just we didn't have that type.
We're special.
Yeah, we didn't have that type of relationship. Yeah, we just didn't have that type of relationship. So when it got to that point where it got really bad 10 years in, it was just like, whoa, what's happening? And it felt like we were both blindsided by it. Yeah. So it's like you were saying about that you had the fear of abandonment. And I had some of that too, but mine shows up a little bit more like fear of engulfment, which basically means somebody else like absorbing me, I guess is the way to explain it. So when you have two people with completely differing needs and personalities, like you needing to be needed and me saying, hey, stop that. Like I can take care of myself and my autonomy was very important to me. I could feel flooded, by your need to do for me. I want to do. So
everything could feel like love bombing almost.
It just didn't feel good. Now, at the same time, I didn't have a reference point to understand what caretaking really looks like. So if I'm in a relationship with you and you're technically not doing anything wrong by wanting to do for me, but my mind is interpreting that as not safe, push it away. It can cause a lot of issues in a relationship.
What you just said is so rich, because do you think that a lot of modern Black women, especially those who are successful and who didn't grow up with a father at home, is that something that they could find themselves not trusting? Like, if a guy is too much of a gentleman, or if a guy treats them a little too well, they'll be like, I don't know about this. It's like they don't trust it. Do you think that that's something?
It's definitely possible. I can't speak specifically for independent women, but I will say for the women that tend to think a good guy is boring or a good guy is dull. I don't want to use the term nice guy, because there's a difference between a good guy and a nice guy. Two completely different things. But there's some women who will think a good guy is boring and dull, and the reason for that is he's not activating her survival mode. So what's basically happening is she's so used to living in survival mode, anything that doesn't keep her in survival mode can feel boring, can feel dull.
Functioning and
dysfunction. It's like her body is used to being under that state of hyper arousal constantly, that when she's with someone else whose nervous system is not making her nervous system stay in that arousal state, it can feel boring and it can feel dull. And she can feel like, oh, this isn't safe. I don't trust it. But yeah. I know I didn't answer your question about independent women. I just really don't know. I can't speak on that.
Yeah. So. It's just, we're all victims of our parents' programming, and all we can do is do the best that we can for it. So anyway, going back to what we were talking about. Like I said, I let a lot of any ideas from like men's groups, YouTube, whatever, I'm glad. I'm trying to imagine if Red Pill was around at the time. Oof.
A mess.
Yeah. I would have been taking notes. Like, this is what
these women,
Yeah. Take my money. I'm like, what money? Right? At the time.
I remember I told you that once. This was forever ago, but I remember. Actually, I think it was your mom that said it. I think you were making a joke, like, "Oh, you just want me for my money," and then your mom was like, oh, "What money? Like, like what?" So that's very funny. But
Anyway, I would have been probably. Now, imagine, man. I can see how so many men, or young men, are attracted to that, because it's like, especially if you don't have that example. Like a good example, because you could have had an example. Your father could have been drunk or abusive or in jail, just
anything,
whatever, just not even there.
He could have been passive,
all types of stuff, right?
And that's what I'm saying to cut you off, sweetheart. But that's what's interesting, that when a man didn't have his father in his life, he tends to idealize who his father would have been.
Yeah.
His father would have been in shape. Yeah. He would have been, stoic. Yeah. He would have been under emotional control. He would be the alpha. He would be this. Very few men that didn't have, very few men who didn't have their fathers in their lives imagine that he might not have been any of that.
Yeah. Like reading shit. Like, no, he'd be, he'd be James Bond. He'd like shoot guns. He'd be very smooth and all that kind of stuff. And he'd teach everything to me.
Yeah.
And like, so it's bad, because I'm just going to go even deeper into it, because there's a ton of Black men in so much pain, and I don't even know if they know they are.
Yeah, because it's suppressed. So I understand that very well, because it took me going through a lot of therapy in order to even recognize that my body was feeling anything. So I can 100% say that if we say to Black men, we say they're in pain, and they might be like, no, I'm not. And they're not lying either, because they're just not tapped into their body. They can't even feel what they're feeling. They've learned to shut down so much so that they don't even know their body's feeling, because I know exactly what that's like. When I would go to my therapy sessions, that's why I always joke about that. My therapist, she would ask me, what are you feeling? I'm like, I like, it's almost like asking me a foreign question. And she'll be like, do you need the book of feelings? And then she'll pull out this book that just had lists and lists of feelings for me to look through and say, okay, maybe this is what I'm feeling right now.
Feeling Leo.
Yeah. And then that would be the first step, is first taking the words. To be able to have words for feelings is the first step. And then the second step is being able to actually feel that feeling in your body, to know that I feel sadness in my back. I feel anger in my chest. I feel, like it's a process in learning to do that. Yeah. So I would never say that I think Black men or men in general are, in denial that they're in pain. I think that they might know something's missing, or they might not be as happy as they want to be.
They're ignorant to it.
But they just don't, don't realize that they're not feeling their feelings, that they've completely shut down, and that they were raised to shut down and not be able to tap into that side of themselves. And the thing is too, is that, and it's really sad because our feelings are our compass. Our feelings are what tell us this, go this way, go left, go right. This is for you. This is not for you. This person is for you. This person is not for you. So we have to be able to know what signals our bodies are sending us in order for us to know which way we want to go, in life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men being raised to not feel their feelings actually harms them later on because they have no compass, because their intuition is off, where it's like they don't know this girl's for you, this girl's not for you, this friend is for you, this friend is not for you. It remains at a very superficial, level.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, like this ton of, like I said, because a lot of times there's certain things men do, like when they try to disguise that they're in pain. Again, they joke, make everything as a joke.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many suffering in silence, and you don't necessarily feel like you have someone that you can depend on. To talk about certain things because they're just make a joke out of it, or be like, they're being a girl, or let's go to the gym, tough it out, that's it. And it's basically suppressed.
Yeah. And that's why I get so angry. I'm sorry, honey. I know I just cut you off again, but that's why I can get so angry at these movements that will tell men to be without women, because men are not going to be the emotional support for each other that man needs. And then you're telling him to stay away from women as well. So where's he supposed to get that emotional support that he needs?
They think, men think that they have emotional support, because what happens is I'm feeling low. My homeboys come over, bro, let's go hit the club. I don't feel down while I'm in the club. So they think that they were supported emotionally. But what's happening is like, you just took a drug.
You're suppressing it more.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
You literally just, or hit the gym. Again, same thing. If you didn't process what you're feeling, you didn't really address it. You just kind of put it to the side. Now, as a human being, eventually there's only so many things that you can put aside until and before you know it, you're having a shouting match with your significant other and don't even know why you're so freaking angry.
Yeah.
And you're not angry at what just happened or happened. It's 3 years ago, something that you didn't process properly. And
it's kind of like when we think about things like road rage, it has nothing to do with the other driver. It's just stuffing so much crap on the inside that you hit a wall, and at some point it's like, oh, I got to take it. It's gonna come out.
I can't let this person know that they got away with it. I must show my manliness. I must show my toughness. I gotta check this dude.
Yeah.
And over what? Because again, like I said, a lot of us are just looking for validation, and we don't realize it. And it's sad, it's like what we were talking about. I think in another video we did. Not only that, about how dealing with ourselves, but I'll say, I don't know if I wasn't told, what to look for in a woman, what to not look for in a woman. I know oftentimes when we hear, if we even get marriage talk from our caregivers, it's usually going to come from a negative space. But, I wasn't told what to expect from a woman or a good woman and what she should offer me. What examples we get, we talk to our friends, we watch TV or whatever it is. And so it's like, what we see is what woman is just supposed to be her body, and that's it. And a lot of guys, what do I want for birthday? You know what I want. I don't want, there's nothing. And then, which I used to do all the time too, which used to really bother you. And I didn't understand why. I'm like, man, because all you do is, it's just projection. It's like, if all I have to do to please this person is to bang them, whatever. Right. But it took me a while to realize how that made you feel. And how it just made me look like not a human being. Just like there's no substance here. Yeah. But you don't really think about it.
Yeah. Because like we were saying before, men are just not taught to identify what their needs are. They're kind of just taught to float through life and then just to survive another day versus actually consciously creating the life that they want to create for themselves. versus just trying to live in survival mode all the time and just, well, I got through today, so I'm good. Well, I got through today and I'm good. Well, I got through today, I'm good. And not actually knowing where they're going. And that's how, when we talk about leadership in marriage, the man has to know where he's going to even lead her. If he doesn't even know where he's going, where is he leading the family to? He doesn't even know where he's going.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't even, make sense. So that's why we talk about the reparenting that I think that a lot of us need. We need to go through that reparenting process to teach ourselves the skills that our parents didn't, teach us. Because even when you were talking about how you can, it can make you feel like, because I tend to be much more stoic, it can make you feel like I don't care. But where that really it comes from is just our families are very different.
Yeah.
Very much so. It's like that's where it comes from. Like, it's how we're raised and how we're programmed. So
yeah, my family was very expressive. You're just my understanding. We don't talk about feelings.
Emotionally speaking, no. And and most of the people in my family were women. So that's why a lot of times when I hear men just create this blanket statement over women, say, oh, they're so emotional. It's like, no, you need to know the woman you are with. Don't just hear people say women are emotional and then project that your girlfriend, your wife is emotional. You have to see her for who she is. And that's part of the reason why we stress doing personality assessments and strengths assessments is because when you externalize, use an external tool, it removes the projections. So when your partner takes an assessment, your partner's answering the questions or whatever, it's showing you who your partner is without your projection of who you think your partner is or who you think your partner should be. And that makes a huge difference to a relationship. Because then you start to see your differences as just differences and not things that your partner is doing to you. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, for example, in our relationship.
And differences oftentimes are great because.
I'm sorry. Because it helps us to grow. Yeah. So it's like when you're in a relationship with a partner that's very similar to you, it can stunt your growth because you don't have someone who's constantly challenging you in a healthy challenging type of way. But when you have a partner who does have differences, that partner helps you to grow because they're challenging you and they're helping you see blind spots that you would not have seen otherwise. And you're able to, grow from that. So what it takes for couples is to recognize that your partner is not a problem. You are not a problem. You have differences. And it's about learning to discern between healthy differences and unhealthy differences, meaning knowing that, oh, wait, that behavior is an unhealthy behavior stemming from trauma or bad programming and stuff like that, versus that behavior is a healthy behavior. I probably don't like it, because I don't operate that way, but it's still a healthy behavior. And a good example of that would be if a man is in a relationship with an assertive woman, assertiveness is a healthy trait for her to have. So she's not doing something to you. You may not like it, but she's not doing something to you by being assertive. And then you could say, okay, sometimes, I can get a little bit, in my feelings when she gets assertive, but it is healthy for her to be assertive. And it's healthy for me to be assertive as well.
Yeah. How does one know? Because it's impossible for people not to ask others for advice.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in relationships. And for some reason, people love asking people who are not in relationships for relationship advice. They love it. Like their favorite thing to do. Right?
Yeah. And they also love asking people who pretend that the relationship is perfect as well. Like whenever women would come to me and ask me, oh, how are you guys still together? How did you do it? And I would always tell them, do you want the truth or do you want the fairy tale? Because the truth is rough, but it's way more beautiful than the fairy tale. But which one do you want? You want the truth or you want the fairy tale? Because you tell me whatever you ask, whatever you say, I'm gonna give it to you. So I agree with you 100% that we will either go to single people who have never been married, and there's no way for them to, they'll do their best because they love us, but they just never experienced it in order to give constructive advice. Or we'll go to people who they put up the perception of perfection, and that's not helpful either. Because when it comes to a relationship, it's conflict is always going to come up. It's impossible. We tend to put a lot of pressure on our partner to be the only person we don't get into conflict with, but there's no other relationship in our lives that we don't conflict with. You get into arguments with your mother, your father, friends, your sisters, your best friend, your coworkers, your boss. The only person in your life you think that you should never be in conflict with is your partner, which is absurd because that's the person you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So you're more likely to have more clashes with that person because that's who you spend a large majority of your time with.
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
Who should people, because it's going to be tough. Divorce rate is what it is.
Yeah.
Let alone the Black community, right? If they're even married. So that's like, who does a Black woman go to for positive relationship other than us? For positive relationship advice? Who does a Black man go to for positive relationship advice? Not just relationship advice, because there's relationship advice out there.
Yeah.
Do for you, keep your own money. For the woman, do for you, keep your own money. Don't let no man buy you anything. If a man buys you, I don't know, this all types of stuff, right? If a man gets it free, that means he could take it away. Just all types of stuff, right? With him, she'll manipulate you. She'll try to take your money. She's going to try to trap you. She's going to try this. So it's like, men stay away, women stay away. Okay, cool. We can say if everyone takes a stance, like, literally everyone, the Black race will cease to exist. Right? So then the question I have is, and then of course the parents are divorced. If you leave it if you have both parents in your life, that's great. If they're living together, wow, that's rare. But most likely you're going to be, more close to your single mother who, don't want to use this word, but understandably is bitter, right? Because she's a single mother. She didn't have any, she didn't have her husband or boyfriend, whatever it is, help her to raise a kid. So then what is she going to tell you?
Yeah.
She's going to offer her perspective. And her perspective is going to come from a place of trying to protect her daughter from her. And the other way around, saying, what she does, what she tells her son, that's a very interesting dynamic. A lot of times you'll find the dynamic where single mothers who raise, men, it's like as if they're the significant other, obviously without the physical stuff. And like, the mother's the most important thing and and which then makes it hard for him to kind of like leave the nest per se. And the other way around, fathers, what are fathers telling daughters? Let's say, again, fathers who are, separate from the mothers and everything. What are they telling? Are they telling their daughters what to look for in a man? What good a man can bring to them? Or is she telling her, go to school, get this, go to college, do for yourself. So you don't have to depend on a guy. What is that father telling his sons? Is he telling them, look for a woman who's honest and caring and this and that, or he's like, never trust a big butt and a smile type of thing, right? So, who do people, I'll start with women. Who does a black woman right now who is seriously looking for a relationship that can lead to marriage? Who does she go for advice?
That's a really good question. I think number one, before she goes to anyone in her circle for advice, she has to first ask herself, is this person married? Has this person ever been married? What was the longest relationship this person has ever been in if they've never been married? That's number one. Number two, she has to ask herself, do I have enough information to know how this person handled conflict resolution in their relationship? Because if I don't even have that information, I'm just assuming they knew how to do it. Because you're not,
or assuming that they never had conflict,
or then assuming they never had conflict, which isn't true. So you have to ask yourself: do I even have information, relevant information that shows me, or evidence that shows me that this person knew how to resolve conflict effectively in their relationship? Okay, so that's number two. Now, if she has no one in her circle that fits that bill, then she can go to a therapist. She can go to a coach. She can go to, possibly there might be groups in her church that can help with that. But she 100% should not go to people who are not even equipped to give her healthy relationship advice, because it's going to do more harm than good.
You mentioned therapist and coach, but are therapists and coach supposed to give you advice?
Well, it depends. Every now and then, a coach won't give you advice about your life. But what a coach, some do.
They're not supposed to.
But they're not
We don't give advice.
supposed to.
We provide tools.
Yeah, they're not supposed to. But what a coach can do is educate their client, right? And say, well, this tool has been proven to work for 80% of couples or whatever. A coach absolutely can do that. But at the end of the day, the coach respects that client's autonomy and the client decides whether or not they want to use that tool.
Correct.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our therapist is supposed to give you advice.
Yeah. Therapists, every now and then, they will, throw in advice here and there, but they know how to use it in a manner that isn't violating. Well, the good therapists know how to do it in a manner that isn't violating their client's autonomy, because it's unhealthy for a therapist to make their client dependent on them for life. The point of the therapy is to help the client feel like they have what it takes to do life right or do life the way that they want to without depending on another person consistently to tell them what to do.
It's like training wheels.
Because when a therapist tells us what to do, the problem is they're infantilizing us, because it's almost like you're looking at an adult and you're this little child saying, tell me what to do. Right. Yeah. But good therapists know, they really won't do that for the most part. And I'll say this here too. A lot of times people will go to therapy to one therapist and they'll say therapy doesn't work, but it doesn't really work like that. No. You have to see a few, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Yeah. Before you know whether or not therapy works for you or not. And the reason for that is a huge part of therapy is what they call the therapeutic alliance, which basically means, what is my relationship like with this client? What is my relationship like with this therapist? Because in order for therapy, for the most part, to be effective, you have to trust the therapist. You have to trust the therapist has your, best interest in mind, and you have to feel seen by that therapist. So sometimes it takes seeing a few before you find one like, oh, this one really gets me. Yeah.
Yeah. So who should they go to? A therapist and a coach. So
or if they have a group at church or their pastor or someone like that, but they absolutely should not under any circumstances go to single friends. They absolutely should not under any circumstances go to married friends who pretend like their relationship is perfect, because that's not true either. And the other thing I will say is that when we're looking for relationship advice, we have to tell the truth, because this is what I mean. A lot of times people will go to their friends for advice, but what they're really looking for is validation. So what happens is they're looking for the friend to say, how you're feeling is valid. I understand where you're coming from. The problem with that is that when we skew the story, so if I go and I say, and I don't say what my role also was in the conflict with my partner, my friend isn't going to know that, right? So my friend is only going to hear what she did or what he did, but they're not going to get the whole story. So the friend, so your friend is not even going to be equipped to even give you good advice, because you're not even telling the full story. Now, it's okay for you to go looking for validation from a friend, right? But you have to recognize the difference between when you need validation and when you need advice.
Yeah. As you were speaking, just thinking, because it sounds like you hear these stories about our generation, and then especially the next one, not having, the wise old couple or wise old one, to go to, go talk to grandpa about how to deal with wifey duties, type of thing, because we don't really have that anymore. And so it sounds a little sad to me, but the only way to get positive advice is you have to pay for it. That's what it sounds like. Until
we break that cycle in our family or in our friend group. So someone has to be willing to be the one to break that cycle, right? And it's just, unfortunately, that's just how, there's no other way around it.
It's really sad, man. So I guess the same goes for men too.
Yeah, right? Same. It's the exact same thing. You have to.
Okay, let's say outside of, because I'm just thinking about our listeners, and our watchers, viewers. I'm trying to think of men here, and men are therapy, blah blah blah, whatever. Yeah. Right. Who's the realist? Because pastors. Well, what if they don't go to church? Right. So how does one know? How does one recognize a good example of someone whose advice you should be taking in pertaining to relationships?
I think you have to ask yourself, how authentic does this person portray their relationship to me? So what I mean by that is, if you have a friend who anytime that friend talks to you about their relationship, it's all bad. That friend is not giving you an authentic representation of their relationship.
Because why are they in it?
Right. Or if you have a friend who talks to you about the relationship and it's always all good, that friend also is not giving you an authentic representation of their relationship. So you need someone before you get relationship advice from someone, you have to ask yourself, how authentic is this person's portrayal of a relationship, right? So I just think it's important to do that. I call it due diligence, like do your own work to figure out, is this person someone that I should turn the volume up on, or someone I should turn the volume down on, or someone I should mute altogether? We have to learn to tell the difference.
I just had another almost, I mean, especially with the company we have, kind of hopeless. I feel a little hopeless for them because people need this. People need people need to have positive discussions about relationships. And the people who are supposed to be doing that are our parents, and our parents don't do it for the most part.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would use the word honest conversations more than positive conversations.
For sure.
Yeah. I think it's definitely necessary. So because if we're not surrounded by people that are having honest conversations about relationships, we can think our relationship is worse than it actually is. Yeah. But when we have an accurate portrayal of what happens in a romantic relationship dynamic, then we are better equipped to say, okay, my relationship needs work on this or needs work on that, or, oh, we're in a good space. And you're able to identify the real problems from things that are not actually problems. So yeah. It's important. It's important.
But
so when I hear you ask me, when you say, it's sad that people didn't have it, like, me, I'm not going to stay in the past. So I'm going to say it is very sad that you didn't have it. And I think everyone who's feeling that sadness that they didn't have role models to show them what a healthy relationship dynamic looks like, I would say go through the therapy process so that you can grieve 100%, because you deserve to have a set of parents or a set of grandparents or an aunt and uncle, someone who would be there for you to show you how to do this relationship thing. And you were robbed. You didn't get what you deserve to get. So I would tell anyone that's feeling that way to definitely go to therapy and grieve not having that. But I will also say, do your best not to get stuck there, because so that you don't let the past to continue to control your present and your future. Go through that grieving process. And then after that, you can work with a coach, and a coach will help you to set goals and, create vision for your life and yada, 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 or whatever.
Do you think this is an issue that, I don't want to speak to them, based on the research you've done, you may or may not know the answer to this. Do you think this is something that people from people from the country of India deal with a lot, not knowing what to expect in a relationship and who to go for advice?
I don't want to speak on something that I don't know, but I will say the little tiny bit that I do know, their culture is different. And their culture also values marriage. So we have to understand that that's very different than when you're living in a culture that devalues marriage. But because I don't know a lot about it, I definitely can't speak to...
No, that's fair.
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
Because I'm just trying to think, I wonder if our community is the one that's the most negative. Are we the least married community?
That I do not know. Well...
I know for sure.
Yeah.
That for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're the least, but if we're one of the least, we have to be in terms of population. Because I'm not trying to speak for them, but I don't recall a lot of, and please, whoever, I'm not trying to offend you. I don't recall a lot of my Latin friends not having I'm not saying their biological father, but having a positive male figure in their lives. I don't know of many. I do not. Same thing with white guys. I do not. I don't think I've ever met a person from India who didn't have their mom and dad at home. I don't think I don't.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the truth is you have to value yourself in order to value your child. If you don't even value yourself and you don't think you're worth much, you're not going to see your child as being worth much either. So leaving them just is like dust off your shirt, kind of. It's like it's because you have to first want to see yourself in another person. But if you spend your life learning how to not see yourself at all, you're not going to be there saying, I want to see myself in another person. You've been trying to avoid seeing yourself your entire life. Right? So leaving and abandoning your child, it's almost like it's nothing to you. you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Wow. That's heavy.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
No,
I mean,
listen, I know how you get down, but ooh,
yeah.
that's tough, man.
Yeah, because it takes a certain amount of pride to even care about legacy. You know, it takes a certain level of I matter for you to even be thinking about legacy and wanting to, you know, have a child that goes on into the next generation. And a lot of people confuse this, right? So a lot of people will,
responsibility.
Yeah, it's because it's an honor, right? Carrying on, I'm continuing. And there's a difference between, oh, my bad. There's a difference in continuing your genes and continuing who you are, right? Who you are, meaning your values, your worldview, how you view your mindset. These are things you're passing down onto your children that your genes are not just automatically going to do.
Yeah.
So you have to be in their life in order to influence that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we have to first recognize that there may be a lot of Black men who don't even feel worthy of legacy, right? And it might very well be true.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to, you know, think about, but it might very well be true.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's, and, you know, I don't want to make this all Black men, but we want to be the leaders of our community, and, you know, it has to start with us. And so, I don't know, man. Like I always say, like there's a lot of our community is hurting, and again, I would love to speak, you know, not because we're looking for monster, but I would love to reach as many people as possible so they can know that, because, you know, coming up, like before we got into this, how many podcasts did we find like ours that were married couple, right? That just were discussing relationships and the things that they've gone through and what they did to overcome them and the issues our community's facing. I'm pretty sure it exists.
Yeah, I'm sure it exists. I think that they exist, and this is the part of the truth too. This is the interesting thing about human nature, right? We will say that we don't want to be in pain, but we'll gravitate straight to the platforms that keep us in pain.
Yeah.
And we'll gravitate straight to the platforms that monetize our pain.
Yeah.
Right? But we're saying we don't want to be in pain.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I'm sure there's many podcasts out there with, you know, couples and who talk about relationships, whatever. And I think they're harder to find because people are less likely to gravitate to them. They're more likely to gravitate to the things that monetize their anger and their sadness and their hopelessness and their powerlessness. So we have to be honest about that as well, because that's the same thing that makes cults. It's so easy for us to fall into cults because the cult leader is going to say, I have the answers to all of your problems, right? They're going to make you feel that way while also messing with your emotions a lot. And that kind of keeps you, addicted to that cult leader. Because a lot of people say, it's only dumb people that will ever get into a cult. If you look at some of these platforms and how people will go, not even the platforms, but even celebrities, how people don't know these celebrities at all, right? But they'll go hard and believe anything that celebrity says. And it takes almost no evidence for them to believe, and they'll defend them. That's cult-like culture. Yeah. Right? So.
And so, I'm sorry if I'm just taking this all in, because it's just again, literally deeply saddens me because, you know, like I said, the reason why we wanted to make this podcast and this company is we want to be the help that we never had.
Yeah.
Because if we had this channel, you know, this work, the stuff that we learn, man, how much time and hurt and pain, but maybe that's why we went through that.
Who knows?
Right? God puts you through things for a reason. You know what I mean? And so, but yeah, like I said, I genuinely feel bad for people. People are giving up. And again, I speak to a lot of different people, different group chats. I read a lot of things online, and people are just expecting, a lot of women are just expecting to never to get married. A lot of women are just expecting, if they're going to have a child, it's going to be out of wedlock, which again, it happens. I mean, you know what I mean?
But I'm so sorry for cutting you
off.
Go ahead. Earlier today, I was listening to my workout playlist when I was getting dressed this morning. I promise this is related to what you were saying.
It's okay, go ahead. You're
listening to my workout playlist, and Missy Elliott, I think the song is All in My Grill. I think that's the title of the song. And this is an old song. I don't know what year it came out, but it's an old song. And in the song, she says, give me money, buy me clothes, if you want me, where's my clothes? If you want me, give me dough, whatever. So the reason I'm saying that is because what you were saying about people giving up, people are thinking that these relationship issues and how men and women's expectations, they think it's new. Human nature does not change. What we have access to might change. Technologies might change, right? But our nature does not change, no matter what generation you're talking about. So that's why when I hear Gen Zers say, oh, you don't understand, these women now, like young men, they'll say, you don't understand, it's like, yeah, I do understand, because human nature doesn't change. Even as society evolves and we get, even when we get to flying cars, like in the year 2000, they said we'd have flying cars by the year 2000. We're still waiting on the flying cars. So the flying car might be in existence, but the fact that a woman might want you to have the most expensive car has been there since the beginning of time. Before it could have been the most expensive horse, So that has not changed. So when people are saying they're giving up because you don't understand these women now, or you don't understand these men now, a lot of people don't understand that human nature by itself has not changed.
Yeah.
It just hasn't changed that much. So you absolutely can go, if you have grandparents that have been married for a long time, you absolutely can go to them and get advice from them. It doesn't matter that it's a different generation. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I hear that. I understand that. But again, understanding people don't really know how to separate themselves from the situation that that other person is bringing to them. People are just going to people oftentimes will give advice. They project like themselves onto other people.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I would do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, you don't know the circumstances that person was in.
But
you know what I mean?
Here's what I would do is not advice, though. Because advice
People
means
take it as
advice basically is you tell me what your goal is for yourself, and I will tell you what route I see as being possibly the best route for you to take to get to that goal.
I'm telling you right now, the amount of people that understand that, no.
Yeah.
It's advice is, what would you do in a situation?
Yeah, it's kind of like if someone comes to me and says, "Oh, my husband," like we get a lot of those messages. Like one that we get often is, "I've been with my man 3-4 years and he still hasn't proposed." Now, and they'll ask me, "Oh, is that a problem? Should I be worried?" And I'm like, and I will ask them, "What are you worried about? What are the things that you're worried about?" And then once that person tells me what they're worried about, now we can have a conversation. But if I assume that the worry is, well, that means he must not love me. That means that person didn't tell me that yet, right? I have to go into their world in order for me to give constructive advice to anyone. It's your world I have to come into and see where you're coming from, not assuming that my world and your world are exactly the same.
Yeah. So we covered a lot. I got into my feels a little bit there, just
I could see that.
Just processing.
No, that's good.
Yeah. I'm learning how to do that a lot more. Growth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking at my younger self in our relationship, and I'm realizing like, why are you doing that? Why? And you see all the mistakes, and but the thing is, they were all for good reason.
Every behavior is rational.
Yes.
Every behavior is rational.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every behavior is rational for that person.
Yep.
There's a stronger level of pain that person is trying to avoid.
Yep.
Therefore, that behavior is rational. Now, it might not be the best decision for them to make, but if we recognize that when someone does something that we think is crazy, that there's a deeper level of pain that person is avoiding, then we can extend compassion to that person.
Yeah. I forgot what I was saying.
Now, that was 100% on me because I cut you off.
Yeah.
So,
you're good.
You're talking about seeing your younger self and the mistakes that you made.
Yeah. So seeing my younger self and the mistakes that I made, and I'm just catching it like, man, like, what are you doing? I just sometimes I'll ruminate, think about why did I do that and why. But again, if I'm understanding a lot more now, I was trying to understand who I was. I was trying to find myself. Yeah. And well, maybe I'm this guy. I thought I was this guy, but maybe I'm this guy. Yeah. I thought I was this guy, and this is a constant search for identity.
Yeah.
And Black men need, just really think. If you're a Black man out there and, your girlfriend or what is pregnant and you're thinking about, just really think about the pain that not having that, how that made you feel. If you're actually in touch with it, with how you're feeling, and ask yourself, why would you want someone else to have to go through that? I understand it's scary, but it's needed. And it's just going to keep making more and more and more dudes growing up in pain and just trying to figure out, what am I?
Mm-hmm.
What am I supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if 60%, 70% of these dudes are acting like this, well, maybe I should act like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to act like these, because, you know what I mean? And it's just versus just understanding just whoever you are is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's not going to be a popular take, because, you know, Black men, we don't want to believe that we're a monolith, but we sure do act like it, sure do say and speak like it, you know?
Yeah, there's a desire to keep all Black men the same while saying we're not the same at the same damn time.
Yeah.
You know, so I agree with you 100% on that. As far as what you were saying about the amount of single moms and the pregnancies out of wedlock within the Black community, something that I've noticed, and it's a huge pet peeve, is that a lot of times when men talk, they will say, she ended up getting pregnant. So it's a way of wording it to distance myself from the responsibility for what actually happened, versus saying, I got her pregnant. You know, they will say,
he got pregnant.
No, or I got her pregnant. Yeah. He will say she ended up getting pregnant, as if he has no clue how it happened. Yeah. And it will be the same thing for the woman. Instead of saying he got me pregnant, say I got myself pregnant, right? Because that's accountability and responsibility. So even the way that we say things, we can keep our growth stunted.
Yeah, I agree. Well, like I said, we covered a lot today. You know, couples out there, I understand, you know, the first place we usually go to our friends for advice about certain things. I forgot the saying, but if you want to take advice from someone, that person should be in a position of where you want to be, at the very least. That doesn't mean you have to listen to them either, but at the very least, before you start listening to them. Otherwise, how valuable is this information? Because if you're listening to people who are in the same boat that you're in, but you don't deem as, you know, goals wise or success wise, then what are you doing? You might as well listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Because it'll be the same thing around. But
I'm going to say one last thing here in closing, about what you said about, you know, the ruminating. I will say that the amount of work that you've done is not easy. So it's just not.
Yeah,
and I will not tell anyone that growth work is easy. But like I always say, what's worth having that's easy to get. It's not. It's not easy. But there's a certain level of internal peace that makes it 100% worth it. You know what I'm saying? So, and I will say to every man, Black man, any man out there who didn't grow up without a father and who's still beating up on himself for not having a father, something that you can do, and it's going to feel weird at first, but eventually the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with doing it, is when you find yourself feeling like you don't have an older man, you know, a healthy older man to go to and ask for advice. Picture yourself at the age of 60 or 65 and visualize yourself giving yourself advice, right? And say, what would 65-year-old Michael say to me right now?
Yeah.
Visualize that, you know, and give yourself that advice that you might be able to give yourself in the future. Yeah. And that's for men that don't have that man that, you know, that they can go to and get healthy advice from.
Yeah. Who the hell is Michael?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for joining us this week on our fourth episode, I think.
I have no idea.
Well, whatever. Our next episode of our Couples Development Podcast. We thank you guys for joining us. Until next time, bye. Have a good weekend.
And one last thing before in closing, I'm going to go ahead and link the video that we were talking about in this episode to the end of this video, so you can check it out.
All right. Bye.